Marilyn Kibler-Cologne, President of the Alliance of Technology and Women, ATW. And on behalf of ATW, we welcome you to the 2020 Executive Leadership Forum. And a special good evening to our friends and colleagues in Europe and Asia who are joining us tonight. Welcome to ATW Leadership Forum. We're just so delighted that you're here with us tonight. And I'm pleased to welcome you to our first online Executive Leadership Forum. In our virtual conference room, it's so great to see familiar names of our speakers, of our corporate partners and panelists, and all the friends of ATW. A lot of you have worked tirelessly with ATW over these past 6 months as we took our monthly programs online starting in March. And we welcome all of you to our new programs such as Connect Fridays and the Women Who Lead program and our new Leadership Development program, all designed to help our members and our community stay connected as we go through these times of quarantine and isolation. These times of disruption and uncertainty challenge us with defining a new normal, where we need to redefine or refresh our strategy and roadmaps as we look to create new business models to survive and thrive. Yet these are really opportunities for people to come together to support one another. People are the foundation for change, for inspiration, for new ideas and innovation. They are our employees, our brand, our credibility. At ATW, the foundation of everything we do is great people. We are an all-volunteer organization of over 250 members that share in the vision of changing the face of technology with women. Our mission is to increase the number of women in leadership and strengthen the pipeline of girls entering STEM fields. And we recognize that what we do is not meaningful unless it's taken in with context with our local community and the national and worldwide audiences we serve. As members and friends and colleagues of ATW, we stand firm together in our values of equality, diversity, inclusion, integrity, and respect. We believe that our diversity makes us better people, more understanding and empathetic, to connect as individuals, as friends, as a community, as a society, and as a nation. It is our diversity that makes us stronger, and that Black lives matter. The conversations must start. We must listen and learn. The time to lead with empathy and compassion is now. And we have an incredible and special program for you tonight. We have over 34 speakers and panelists who are speaking on a myriad of topics that reinforce that digital disruption is here and that it has been accelerated and it is here now. I want to express a deep thank you to more than 30 volunteers who have contributed over 1,000 hours of work over these past few weeks to create these sessions and to configure this new software platform that is specifically designed for interactive networking, face-to-face networking, just like you would experience at a pre-COVID or pre-pandemic event. And ladies and gentlemen, what you will see tonight, your networking experience, this software platform, is being brought to you by the power of an all-woman team. Women in technology, all rock stars, all superheroes, all amazing and incredible women. So I'm sending out a big thank you to all the volunteer teams that are making this event possible. And a special thank you to our sponsors for your generous resources that allow us to continue our work in developing our leadership programs and our Great Minds programs for our community outreach that encourages young girls to learn STEM and how with innovation and technology, we can make the world a better place. And thank you to our speakers and panelists and to our keynote speaker, Anne Chow, CEO from AT&T Business. We are delighted to have you all here and are looking forward to hearing from you. And now we're ready to start the program. And just a quick programming note, be sure to use the QA feature and not the chat feature to ask any questions to our speakers. There will be a 10-minute Q&A session after every speaker session, so be sure to have your questions ready. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce my friend Valerie Freeman, ATW Advisory Board Chair and Chief Executive Officer from BravoTech, to introduce our keynote speaker, Anne Chow. Valerie, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Marilyn, and good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Anne Chow. Anne has the distinction of being the first woman of color CEO at AT&T Business in its 144-year history. She is the highest ranking Asian American at AT&T, male or female. She is now responsible for serving nearly 3 million business customers in more than 200 countries with over 30,000 employees and $37 billion in revenue. And if that isn't pressure enough, she has just been named the chair of United Way's 2021 raises millions. She is uniquely qualified for both of these roles with her energy and her commitment. Anne has been with AT&T for 30 years and has held non-traditional executive roles in a lot of areas: direct and indirect sales, operations, marketing, customer care, international operations, product management, and strategic planning. She's a founding member of AT&T University's governing board and actively supports the company's leadership development imperative. She has served on the national board of directors of the Girl Scouts of the USA. She co-chairs the Parents Board at Georgia Tech and sits on the board of directors of Franklin Covey Company. She created one of AT&T's fastest growing employee networks, AT&T Women of Business, which has 4,800 members across 27 countries. And recently, she co-championed the launch of the Women of Color initiative at AT&T, which focuses on promoting an inclusive environment for this rapidly growing. We lost her. Yeah. Should I go ahead? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Marilyn and Valerie, and to everyone out there that is part of the Alliance of Technology all around the world, and women for having me here today. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. And Valerie, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And Marilyn, as I was listening to your opening comments, I was thinking to myself that you were actually touching on parts of my keynote that I intend to share with you. So I think it was just destiny that we are all coming here together. And I'm very honored to be part of your executive forum here. So there has never been a time that has been more critical for all of us across society to come together. And I want to take a moment to say thank you to each of you, all of the amazing men and women and people across ATW for all that you're doing for your companies, for your customers, for your organizations, and for your communities. I applaud you for taking some moments to invest in yourself by participating in this forum. And I hope that at the end of our time together, that you will feel that it was worthwhile for us to get together, to learn together, to support each other, and yes, to perhaps cry and laugh and yell and scream and maybe cuss a little bit together as well. Because that is what we are all about. And if you think about the two kind of intersection points of what forms your organization, it is at the intersection of technology and women with which you all were formed, right? And as we have seen in this pandemic, there has actually never been a time where social connection has been so critical. In fact, I wish they would have called social distancing physical distancing, because in actuality, while we are physically distanced as we are here tonight, or if it's morning or if it's evening, depending on where you are, or afternoon, we are actually socially very close together. You know, many of us have been now in this COVID environment. You know, if you're in Asia, you have been going through it since the beginning part of the year, and now are starting to achieve whatever that next normal might be. For those of us here in the US, we are now in our, I guess it's been about 6 months of really trying to assess and understand what is it that we have to do as leaders to continue to lead through this time of crisis. And I would offer to you that leadership is all about growth. So let's talk about what is crisis. A crisis is a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. It's a time when difficult and important decisions have to be made. It is also, and this is very, very true in terms of the pandemic, it's the turning point of a disease when an important change takes place, whether it indicates recovery or death. And so there's no question, I think, now that we all absolutely would embrace the fact that we are living in a time of crisis. And it is not just one crisis. It is at least three, and depending on what you're going through in your business or your personal life, it's likely more. We are experiencing the global pandemic together. We are experiencing economic recession. We are also experiencing systemic racism and social injustice, whether it's in the criminal justice system, healthcare, or education. So the big question here is, what do you need to do to lead in a time of crisis? And there's no question, I don't think that anybody here in this audience would question the fact that in times of crisis, you actually need more leadership, not less. Why? Because as you think about how people react to crisis, they react with uncertainty, with doubt. They feel threatened. There's an immense amount of mistrust. There's stress. There's instability. And this is where leadership comes in. And if I could share with you the lessons that I will go through today and just some of my thoughts on leading in a time of crisis have been built on my career in the community, my career in the company. A little bit behind that bio, I have had 17 different jobs. I have had 26 different bosses. I've served on numerous nonprofit as well as other boards. And so this is kind of my compilation of lessons in leadership. I also want to share, because this organization is about women and it's about technology, that I am the proud mom of 2 daughters who are in college. I'm a new empty nester. My older daughter is at Georgia Tech, and she's majoring in chemical engineering. And my younger daughter, we just sent off to the University of Michigan with an intent to study biomedical engineering. So I am all about women in STEM careers, making a difference and changing the world. So I have this thing I call the foundational 7 C's of leadership. And the intent of my discussion here today with you is not to probe deeply into these 7 C's, but to talk about these 7 C's and how we build on them in terms of leadership during crisis. I like to call it, a little quippy here, I've spent plenty of time in marketing and in sales, charting the 7 C's. So at the core of the 7 C's are character and competence. In my mind, you must have both to be a great leader. I've often been asked in my career, and so what is it that you look for in a leader? Well, if you were thinking about asking me that, I'm about to go through this framework with you. So why is it character and why is it competence? Because if you think about it, you need both in order to establish trust. Someone may have incredible character, but may not be competent for their role. Someone may have incredible skills and competence in an area, but they may not have the character and integrity with which to build trust and a trustworthy, open, and honest culture, right? And so character and competence are at the foundation of my framework for great leadership. Collaboration. Collaboration is an obvious one, right? All of us know, and during this time, we know for sure that collaboration is how everything gets done. And so for those of you who are in the early parts of your career, I'd encourage you to think about, even though you may be an individual contributor right now, you can go so much further and make such a bigger difference in what it is that you're doing if you collaborate and if you proactively collaborate with all the people around you. Courage. Courage is another one. I think this one is probably a characteristic that you would absolutely associate with leaders, right? It's not that leaders are not fearful, but they act and can make decisions and work through the fear. They acknowledge their fear, but they have the courage to plow through. Leaders have the courage to make the right decision when it may not be the most popular decision. And so courage is a foundational C. Communication. This is an obvious one. Leaders are those who have the ability to communicate. And I don't mean standing on a giant stage, speaking to thousands of people. I mean the ability to relate, the ability to communicate with somebody in multiple different forms, whether it's in person, which is ideal, and I know all of us miss that so much, whether it's in a team meeting, whether it's on video, whether it's an email, text, or on social media. There are numerous ways to communicate, and great leaders I have found in my experience have mastered the art of communication, and they are always working on that art. Curiosity. This one to me is key. And I feel that curiosity is such an important trait of leadership because you're always asking why, right? And what it implies to me is that one, you're humble enough to realize that you don't have all the answers, which is why you're curious about something. And you're also always kind of wondering, well, could something be done better? And I wonder, or what if? And so curiosity to me is an important characteristic because I know those people who have great curiosity are those who forge ahead because they're always wondering what could be better, what could be different. The last C in my foundational 7 Cs is one that I would admit is a bit of an Annism. And this is a characteristic that I actually believe is hard to teach. I believe that this is inherent in certain people. Unfortunately, it's not inherent in all people. And that is the C of caring. I have found that great leaders care not only about the business, not only about the bottom line, not only about the customers, but they care about their people. They care about the community. They care deeply about doing what is right for society and humanity as a whole. And if ever there was a time in our history of humankind, we need caring leaders now. Okay, so that is the foundation for leadership. Now, what does leading in a time of crisis require? And how must we build on those 7 Cs to really chart forward in a time of crisis? So I talked about fear a moment ago. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very, very base of it is physiological, and psychological safety, right? So safety is such an important aspect of leading in a time of crisis. And so what is most important then, and what are some of the things that you must do to lead in a time of crisis? And Marilyn, you actually said this up front in your comments, which I'm thrilled about, and that is being able to lead with compassion and empathy. Compassion is the ability to feel something for another living being. Think about caring, right? And empathy is to both understand someone else's feelings, but also to put yourself in their shoes. All right. And so, a couple of things, just as I'm talking to, to an organization that's dedicated to women, there's a Pew Research study that actually showed that 61% of adults say that female political leaders do a better job at being compassionate and empathetic versus 5% say males are, right? And that 59% of adults say the same thing about female leaders versus 4% who say that about male leaders. And why is that? So why is that one of our secret, not so secret weapons as women leaders, right? And that is because we have an ability to relate to others. Leadership is about others, and women were made for this. Women were made to be the world's leading, compassionate, and empathetic leaders. What's the next C that builds on my foundation? That is connection. I don't think that, and by the way, I'm not trying to sell you something right now, right? As I am responsible for AT&T Business, but to all the AT&T customers out there, thank you. But connection, right? This is what our business has been about since the very, very beginning of our existence, connection. And if you could imagine going through this pandemic without the capability to connect with each other via video, via voice, via text, via social, my goodness, how much more worse off would we be, right? The power of connection is what enables you to relate to individuals, your teams, your organization, your communities, your constituents, whether they're partners, funders, investors, and of course, your customers. And during times of crisis, and again, I applaud ATW for pulling this forum together, it is so important to double and triple down on our connections, both our existing ones as well as our new ones. And there's data out there that says that women fall behind men in establishing connections early on in their career. And that is why organizations like this one and networking are so, so critical. People who feel more connected to others, they have a lower level of anxiety and depression. They have higher levels of self-esteem. They have greater empathy for others, and they are just more trusting and cooperative. And who wouldn't want that as part of their team? Resilience is built and it's strengthened when you give support and you get support, and connections are absolutely key for this. All right, what are some other C's to build on in terms of leading in a time of crisis? Conviction and consistency, right? Crisis is fluid by definition. It is unpredictable. And certainly the confluence of issues that we're faced right now is, to use an overused word that is absolutely perfect, is unprecedented. And so during times of crisis, especially, leaders are looked to gain confidence and affirm certainty. And so conviction enables us to overcome our obstacles because we have strong beliefs in what we're doing, both in terms of our skill and our will. And conviction also comes from passion, by the way. And passion is, working on what energizes you, right? Whether because that will help you overcome resistance, whether it's internal or external. If we were to take a look at how certain countries in the world have dealt with this pandemic, just look at Tsai Ing-wen, who is Taiwan's president and leader. She was the first female, by the way, to be elected to this office. She had, when the pandemic hit her country, she put in place immediately 124 measures to immediately block the spread of virus without lockdowns. And to this date, Taiwan has an incredibly low level of cases and low level of deaths, and now is supporting many other countries, including the US, with face masks and other PPE. Another incredible woman leader, Jacinta Ardern in New Zealand, she was early to lock down, right? Put her country on maximum alert by banning foreigners and others. And again, in her country, just after 6 cases were diagnosed, right? She managed to lock that down, and very, very, very few deaths in New Zealand. So consistency is absolutely important, right? We have to stabilize as leaders the unstable. And it is a true measure of your character, right? And it's key to your communications. And it also affirms your competence, right? I'm sure all of us have been exposed to people, perhaps even in leadership roles, who have flip-flopped, right? And that is incredibly problematic. It is very difficult to be successful when your leader is inconsistent with what he, she, or they want for you to accomplish. Confidence, clarity, and calm. All of these go hand in hand. And while there's data out there that says that teenage girls are less confident than their male peers, the gap between women and men, adults, actually shrinks. So this is an opportunity, I think, for this organization and others to ensure that we focus on the next generation of women, okay? And why this is, and this is sort of fascinating, it's because men rate their abilities higher than their performance would warrant, right? So it's not that women aren't lacking confidence, it's men are actually overconfident, right? And so we were built for confidence. And when you assert your confidence, realize that especially during times of crisis, the people around you need to see it, hear it, feel it, especially in these uncertain times. Calm. Women handle stress better than men. All right, I'm probably stating the obvious, but there's this group of technologists and scientists. There's actually neuroscience that shows that the female brain secretes more oxytocin, right, which is called the cuddle hormone, than the male brain, making women calmer under fire. When things go smoothly, men and women are even in terms of decision making and how it goes, but when the going gets tough and when there are crises, men tend to play the long shots and women tend to think things through, right? And so we were made for this, and it's not because we're nicer or we're more collaborative, and maybe we are, right? But it's because our brains handle the stress hormone, cortisol, better than men's brains can. And that is something that we should harness. Okay, I'm putting on the table another C, and this C is so critical. Marilyn touched on it, and right here in Dallas County, I think all of you know this, right? Our county commissioners declared racism a public health crisis. Black Lives Matter. And I doubt that any of us would disagree, right? That if our city or our state or our country or our world was not as colorful as it is, it would be quite the boring place. And that said, we have to do better for our communities of color. And I mean that figuratively and literally. It's our differences that make us who we are. Each of us is different from each other, and that is the beauty of humanity. So when crisis occurs, it's so important for us as leaders to ensure that we must address color. So what's that mean? Well, this means that if we're able to, and if we're to establish connection and demonstrate compassion and empathy to lead through crisis with others, how do we do that if we don't understand the unique experiences, perspectives, and feelings and issues of our communities of color? There are data and facts that say and show, as now that we're well into the pandemic, that our communities of color are disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, whether it's the health impacts, whether it's access to healthcare, as well as access to education. On the small business front, we also all know that small businesses are the lifeblood of the American economy, but also as well as our local economies. And in fact, there are 12.3 million and 40% of US businesses are women-owned. Okay? And 64% of new women-owned businesses are owned by women of color. Right? Growth rates of businesses owned by Black women and Latinas surpass the growth rates of others. So when crisis hits, it's imperative that we embrace diversity even more fully, that we embrace inclusion, and that we embrace belonging as part of our leadership action plan. Now is the time to listen, to learn, to seek to understand, to engage, and to act. We all are leaders and all have opportunity to be a leader in this. Okay, so now with all of the foundational leadership characteristics and the additional C's that I put on top of this, great leadership is about hearts and minds and souls. It's about arms and legs and brains and brawn and individuals and groups and teams and organizations at large, customers and partners and constituents and communities. Great leadership, though, requires passion. And for each of us to bring people together, to move us forward, requires your passion and your purpose. This is something that I'm calling your calling. And so no matter what role you have, no matter what your job description is or your job title, whether you're in the workforce for a year or 10 years or 30 years plus like me, like this oldie, you've got to stay focused on your calling, right? No matter your role, no matter your experience. It is important to know, and I'm often asked, what advice would you give to next generation leaders, Anne? And this is one of the key ones, which is you are your competitive advantage. You are your best competitive advantage. You are your greatest gift to the world. And so these are my sweet 16 C's of leading in a time of crisis. In terms of closing here, what I'd like to do is just kind of share with you this framework. And this framework for me is really all about, this really reinforces, I think, what Marilyn was saying up front and what so many of you are committed to, and that is, ultimately, this is about people coming together. We all want prosperity. We all want success, right? This is about the private sector, the public sector, the nonprofit sector, the community members, family units, all coming together to pursue prosperity for all people as well as for our planet. And as you think about your job, okay, your job is not your calling, right? Do your job. It's important to do your job. It puts food on the table and a roof over your head, all right? Answer your calling. And if you're lucky like me, your job can be your calling, all right? Do so in the context of your job wherever you can. I'm asking that you not only do your job, answer your calling, but also pursue your work and live on purpose. Life is the most precious gift that we have. Let's not squander it, and let's lead together. I think I'm going to kick it back now to Valerie for some Q&A from the audience. Valerie?
All right, here I am again. Okay, so I'm having a little bit of screen issues here. So if I get frozen, just keep on going, Anne.
Okay.
There's one question from a young woman in her mid-20s. She says, I feel my confidence is shaken. I have been rejected from so many jobs, and I find myself doubting that I can be an asset anymore. Any advice?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, do not give up, okay? First of all, there are really only two outcomes. There is success and there is learning. There is no such thing as failure, okay? Every roadblock that you encounter, every barrier that you run into is just simply a path and a step to getting you to where you're needing to be and where you're supposed to be. It may not be clear to you yet, but do not give up. I'll tell you a quick story. You know, I started out, my undergrad education is in electrical engineering. And so I started out in our business as a network architect. Early on in my career, I was told that I needed to go to sales. I didn't want to go to sales. I didn't actually know what sales even was. But after a period of time, several of my mentors told me that if I aspired to management, that I really needed to do it. I was rejected 5 times until the 6th time that I tried to interview, did I get in. You know, the first couple of times I was angry, I was upset, but then I realized each one of those quote unquote rejections was telling me something, right? It was telling me, oh, I was missing a piece of this, so how do I go and address this? How do I get different experiences to knock down each of those roadblocks? And it took me a couple of years to get into sales, and my path was not at all direct, but I will tell you, please persevere, right? Do not give up. You have a secret sauce. You just don't, it may just not be coming to life for you, and just keep going. There's no such thing as failure.
Good advice. Now here's another one. How do we sustain consistency and aspiration, since that's the key to leadership? Normal human tendency is to level off or get satisfied after a certain limited success.
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. So Anne's answer to this is going to be somewhat variable, okay? Success, your definition of success is different than everybody else's. So in other words, if you're in your 20s and you're just starting your career, your view of success is different than perhaps if you're in your 30s and you're in mid-career, or if in your 40s and you're in your career, or if you're me and you're in your 50s, and you're in what I would call, I kind of chunk out careers in trimesters. Maybe it's because I'm a mom, but I'm in my last trimester of my corporate career, clearly, right? And so be very clear about what your measure of success is. It could be just a certain type of job, working on a certain kind of technology, working in a certain industry, working for a particular person. It could be a certain title. It could be a certain amount of money or financial independence, and that will vary throughout your career. So I actually rebel against the notion of a corporate ladder. And since I'm speaking to a group that is focused on women here, I will tell you that what I like to do is I like to call it the corporate lace. Okay, why is that? Why do I hate the ladder? Because there's one way up and one way down, and you can't fit multiple people on it, right? I believe in the corporate piece of lace. Every piece of lace is different. There is no beginning. There is no end. Each piece is beautiful. Each piece is unique. And there are many different ways to get from point A to point B. And I'd encourage you to think about your careers that way, is that you may not always be, quote unquote, climbing in the traditional corporate sense, but that is likely success for you. That could be success for you at that point in your life. If I were to share a quick example, I grew up on the East Coast. I started my career on the East Coast. 15 years into my career, our New Jersey-based company was bought by a Texas company. And so the taps to move to Texas started coming. I said no 6, 7 times because we were not ready as a family. I did not want to take my children away from my parents in terms of that kind of geography. And I said no. And that was what success meant to me, though. And I knew that I would be passing up on hierarchical opportunity, but it was well worth the trade-off. And it was, here's the important thing, it was my choice. Valerie, next question, if we have time. I think we lost Valerie. Marilyn, are you coming in?
Hey, Anne. Yeah, I'll pitch it for Valerie. So
Okay.
there's some other questions here. One says, please share on how you fine-tune your communication skill. Seems to be the one key item to be a great leader.
Yeah. So each of the items is critical, by the way, right? But it is, communications, absolutely. So how do you refine it? You just keep practicing, okay? You just keep practicing. It's trial and error, all right? And if you're, if you're an introvert or if you're shy and you don't like getting up in front of people, like I said, being a great communicator doesn't mean that you have to command a giant stage. It means that you have to be able to relate to people and get your message across, right? In multiple different, in multiple different forms. So practice makes perfect here. So much of communication, by the way, is understanding your audience, whether it's an audience of one, because you're having a one-on-one meeting, whether it's an audience like this one, an actual audience, or whether it's even an audience in a meeting that you might be presenting in, or even just simply participating in. So that is also really key, is understanding your audience in terms of improving and honing your communication skills.
All right, well, I'm back. You went off, Anne, and I had to get you back on. Don't you love technology? Oh, it's just great.
Yeah.
Okay, so so here's another question. What do you think, and let me know if you've already asked this, what do you think are the next steps in tech and telecom as we deal with COVID-19?
Yeah. So great question. So this is what I do in my day job. Okay, so what I think is next for tech and tech, telecom, and COVID. COVID has accelerated digital transformation, both in a business sense as well as in a consumer sense, by at least 5 years. Okay, so if you think about your own company or your organization, I would bet that there was probably not the most progressive remote work policies, right? Because we were biased to a physical place. COVID has forced this notion of having to be physically together and blown that up, right? So in a traditional work environment, remote work and distance work and flexible work workplaces are here to stay. And that is materially changing how we think about how telecom, communications, and technology can evolve to better serve businesses in that much more hybrid and flexible and highly distributed and mobile way. Another example is you think about consumer experiences, right? Whether it's online learning, distance learning, think about your gym. Okay, couldn't for the longest time, gyms were not, and in certain states, they're still not able to go back to the gym. So now you're having these experiences that were once in a physical location, but now you're doing them at home, right? Is that going to change materially? Well, I would offer to you that those companies, those businesses that have figured out how to pivot their model, their business models to entirely digital, right, or very heavily digital, are the ones who are figuring out a pathway to move from, using Marilyn's words again, from survival to thriving. And this is also here to stay. So I think in this dawn, in this dawn of a new decade, we're also super excited about the dawn of 5G and what 5G technology will enable in terms of solutions. We believe that it is going to trigger the next set of innovation that will offer unique experiences that meld the physical and the digital worlds together. That's going to be incredibly exciting. And I really believe that, I happen to be one of those people who believes that everything happens for a reason. And I believe that we will look back on this day and this very difficult period of time in our history and look back on it and say, you know what? 2020 was a year that had to happen because we needed that to be better, to get better, to do better on all fronts.
All right, very good. Here's another question. Posting on behalf of a lady who posted this in general chat, how do you find or define your calling?
It's so, this is such a personal thing, right? Your calling to me sits at this intersection of your passion and your purpose. For me, to give you an idea of this, right, I believe that my calling is, if you ask me what my life's purpose was, I would tell you that I am here to ensure that I leave this place better than from whence I came. And that is not just my life in aggregate, but it means this conversation, this forum. It means in a meeting that I have, in a relationship that I'm building, in a mentoring session that I'm doing. And that is my objective. I have numerous passions. I shared with you earlier, women in technology. I have a passion for education. I have a huge passion for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I would say to you that when I was in my 20s, just starting my career, I had no sense of that, right? Why? Because success meant for me, earning a great paycheck where I could build my financial independence and building my social network and going out with my friends and having a great time, right? I wouldn't have been able to tell you what my calling was. Then, I was fortunate enough to find a life partner and get married. That helped add clarity. And then I had kids. And that had an immense amount of clarity for me that I'm hugely committed to the next generation of leaders. which is why I love spending time with groups like this at forums like this. So your calling is yours, and it's yours alone, and it will evolve as you move through your career and as you move through your life, okay? There is no wrong answer. There's only your right answer.
Right. Well, I have to ask this because before I froze, I was going to mention this in the intro, and that is you went to Juilliard as a pianist at age 10. Now, why was that not your calling?
You know what, I realized that, so, as Valerie's pointing out, so I went to Juilliard pre-college. I went there for 7 years. For those of you who are unfamiliar, it's a renowned music school in New York City. Juilliard pre-college is every Saturday, every week throughout the school year. So I was in regular school and I did music school effectively Friday night and Saturday all day in New York City. I realized in my 7 years of doing that, and by the way, at my peak, I was practicing 6 hours a day, all right, 6 hours a day. You wake up, practice, go to school, come home, practice, do your activities, practice, eat, practice, okay? I realized that I did not have a passion for becoming a musician or even being a musician. I had a passion for music. I also, did my homework, as you might expect, since I wound up being an electrical engineer, which is kind of weird, I guess. But music and math are correlated, by the way. Right? There's science in that. I realized that if I was going to make music my profession, I'd actually have to be practicing 12 hours a day. And there was no way. I knew myself better than that. I did not have that kind of dedication, that kind of passion, that kind of commitment to that particular craft. So that's a little bit about why that wasn't my calling. But I didn't know that in the beginning, I didn't know that it wasn't in the beginning.
Sure. So here's another question. Was there a particular point in your career when you noticed your confidence level soar?
Yeah, so look, this is an amazing thing with women, okay? And for those of you who are not women in the audience, I want you to listen tight on this, okay? One of the unique things about us as women is, who is our greatest enemy? It's ourself, okay? It's ourselves. And this is why this question of confidence is so critical. Back in my generation, I'm an old Gen Xer. There used to be this commercial, I think it was a Charmin commercial maybe, and the guy had like a little angel and a little devil on each shoulder, right? And the devil was telling him to do bad things, the little angel was telling him good things. Okay, we as women have that. This is what I call, the angel is your girl boss. The devil is your mean girl, okay? Here's what your inner mean girl says to you, right? Your inner mean girl says, oh my gosh, I'm so not prepared for this meeting. I'm going to completely flub it up. Oh my gosh, my hair looks terrible. Man, where all those wrinkles come from, right? Man, I sounded like an idiot. Why did I say that? I gotta do better, right? Your girl boss says, hey, you gotta learn from it. It's over, move on, right? You own it, you own your mistakes, you own your learning, and you forge ahead. And each of us have to help each other channel our inner girl boss, because that mean girl is always there. All right. And so the answer to that question is, Valerie, there wasn't one time, because I would tell you, even today, I have moments of self-doubt. I have moments of imposter syndrome where I feel like, oh my gosh, how the heck did this happen? Right? This was never part of my aspiration, right? But yet I'm here, right? There was no training book for this, right? And so, so we've got to help each other and help ourselves channel that inner girl boss and not that mean girl.
Very good. All right, here's another one. What does a typical day look like for you? Could you share some productivity strategies?
Oh gosh, okay. Productivity strategy. There's of course the pre-COVID and the post-COVID thing. So I'm gonna share a little bit of both. So my pre-COVID day would typically be that I was not in my office. I would be out in the field. I would be spending time with customers, as well as partners, as well as my people, okay? So that a typical day would be filled with that, perhaps some time with, key constituents and others, okay? And the way that I would say organized is, I'm like a crazy person with my calendar. I think all of us are like that. And what I would have to do is, because one of the things that I think all of you are realizing, and all of us are so realizing in this COVID environment, is you cannot keep going at warp speed all the time. right? Life and work are like, it's like exercise, right? The best kind of training for you is interval training. So you will have peaks and valleys. And so it's important to schedule and be mindful of those peaks and valleys, whether they're in a day, in a week, in a month, in a quarter, right? Whatever your measure of time is. In a COVID environment, I'll tell you, it's much more difficult. In a COVID environment, because I'm sedentary and largely virtual, the days and nights and weeks and hours all meld together. I mean, you can literally roll out of bed, get cleaned up and be, on a call, within 15 minutes, right, of waking up. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? And you go all day, all night long, and you're not as mindful of giving yourselves breaks or getting outside or walking around. So productivity tips that I would give you would be, and this may be counter to what you would think, is you've got to engineer and plan for those downtimes, because otherwise you cannot be at your best in those peak times. And look, this COVID thing and this work environment that we have right now is going to go on for a long time. And we will never go back to what normal was, right? There's only the next normal and the next normal, or the never normal, okay? Or the never normal. I would offer it's actually never going to be normal. And so with that, we really have to build our resilience, right? And our fortitude. And, it's like Ariana Huffington, and her whole Thrive approach. We need sleep. We need to fuel our bodies with, good, healthy nutrition. But we also have to fuel our bodies with positivity around us, which means the people that we surround ourselves with, the media we watch, and how we spend our downtime, and really invest in yourself, and don't lose sight of that.
Hey, Anne, it's Marilyn. I'm back on. Switching gears a little bit, there's a question here regarding interviewing. As a woman, do you have tips for standing out in interviews and mastering the art of asserting your confidence?
Yes. So this is all about doing your homework, okay? And this is probably not a surprise to you as a former pianist. You've got to do your and engineer. You've got to do your homework, which means think about what I said before about knowing your audience. Do your research about the company. Do your research about the person. Think about those C's that I just outlined, right? The Sweet 16. Think about connection. Look for some commonality with the person you're talking to. Look for some uniqueness of what you bring to the table with respect to that company or that organization, right? Look to try to strike that connection as early and as distinguished as possible. Now, you may have an interviewer, by the way, who is not interested in talking to you about your personal life, where you went to school or whatnot, right? And so it will be important early on to assess whether this is someone who wants to be more personal in their interview process, or if they want to just get straight down to business, right? And you need to be prepared for both, by the way, right? You need to be able to not just be incredibly affable and likable and competent and demonstrate your capabilities, but you also need to show that why you, right? What's your unique value proposition and what makes you different than everybody else that they're interviewing, right? And so, and I would word it that way, right? Well, I believe, Valerie, or I believe, Marilyn, that my experience set in these sets of projects that I've done really make me uniquely qualified to join your organization to help you tackle some of these things which are coming up, because I've got experience here. And I'm so looking forward to the opportunity to learning more, because I so believe in your company's purpose, which is X, Y, and Z. And I feel so strongly that our values are very much aligned, right? And so you want to be, you want to demonstrate that connection both on an individual level, but also at a company or organizational level as well. And I think it's really a fine line as well, because you don't want to come off sounding, and I think this is a little bit of a tax that women have sometimes as well, right? You don't want to come off sounding so cocky, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's, in various conditions, there's unconscious bias out there that sometimes, again, right? Well, she was so bossy, right? Men are never called bossy, right? She was so aggressive, right? Or, man, she was just so cocky, man, she was, the B word, right? And so that's all part of the finesse here, right? That you will develop as you practice over time.
Well, Anne, we have enjoyed your comments. We've gotten lots of tips and lots of good advice for everyone. And certainly we really appreciate the time. We know how busy you are, and we appreciate the time that you're spending with us. And the final word is, I know that you quoted Zig Ziglar and a quote on gratitude. And so if you would finish with that, that would be great.
Oh, in terms of you want me to?
The gratitude that you said that gratitude is the healthiest of human emotions.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes. Well, you just said it lovely for me, for Valerie. So thank you for that. Yes, so thank you for that. So so thank you very much, Valerie, Marilyn, for having me, and for ATW for having me. I hope that you found this discussion helpful and useful. If you like, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm on there at Anne Chow on Twitter. I write from time to time and blog a bunch of stuff, so I'd be happy to stay connected with you in that fashion. And I wish you all the best of luck and a wonderful, wonderful forum. So
thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
And everybody go back to the lobby and then to your first session.
Thank you, everybody.